This podcast was recorded on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to elders past and present. This episode contains strong language and adult themes. Hello everyone. Welcome back to those who have listened to the previous 12 episodes. If that's you, I'm afraid I'm not going to be paying for any of the therapy you'll be needing as a result of listening. If you're new, welcome. I'm Nature Disturbed. I'm a naturist who loves... is that the word? I know it's either naturist or naturalist. Which is the one who likes to be naked in public? That's what I'm getting at. But I also love nature. I'm sat, as per usual, in my kitchen sink. Today, I filled the sink with squid ink, and I'm dressed as a Squid Game guard. I've carved out a little mouth hole in the mask, but I forgot to do the eyes. It's really hard to see anything, so I'm freaking out a little bit. Hello? I feel like there's someone in my kitchen. Anyway, let's get this over and done with so I can take this mask off. We'll start with a quick quote to contextualise today's topic. This one is short and sweet, appearing in the original 1981 Clash of the Titans. Release the Kraken. 3 words which echoed through Hollywood and the world. The blurred lines between fact and fiction. An animal that remains legendary, even though we know that it is, in some form or other, real. The Watcher in the Water, in Tolkien's Middle-earth, is a tentacle beast which has taken on a squid-like appearance. There's a giant squid living in the Black Lake at Hogwarts. And we all remember that scene in Pirates of the Caribbean when Elizabeth Swann starts mercilessly hitting on Captain Jack, even though she's supposed to be in love with Will Turner. Why does she do that? It's not right, Elizabeth. You love Will. Oh, thank God, she was just tricking him so that she could take the rum. Oh, hang on, I didn't mean to bring up that scene. I meant to refer to the scenes in which the Kraken brings down great ships with ease. In episode 8, we looked at the Loch Ness Monster. The overall sentiment was that the more and more we learn about that great body of water, Loch Ness, and the more science we can apply to uncovering its secrets, the more certain we can be that there is no great leviathan lurking in its murky depths. Today, we're going to look at an animal which has undergone quite the opposite journey. An animal which has surfaced slowly from the deepest wells of mythology to reveal itself as a very real creature. It's true that the giant squid was never purely legendary. Bits and pieces of these creatures have been washing ashore for as long as their species has been on Earth. And surely, for as long as coastal humans have been stumbling across their bloated, half-eaten carcasses, we have been creating stories to fill in the blanks. Indeed, through mythology, the giant squid is an animal which has taken many names. The Lusca of the Caribbean, Akkorokamui of Japan, and in Scandinavia, the Kraken. The Kraken is a legendary beast capable of dragging ocean-faring ships beneath the waves and taking seamen to the bottom. I take seamen to the bottom, but that's neither here nor there. Because we have known almost nothing about these animals for most of human history, other than the fact that there is something very large and squid-like out there, we have been left to imagine the details. Cultures from across the world have converged on these legends. The past few centuries have seen the formalization of such legends into scientific fact. The details of the legends might not be quite accurate. For example, no giant squid is large or angry enough to take down massive vessels. But all the same, we've now collected enough specimens to know that the giant squid does exist. And it is indeed giant. Now, the exact size of a giant squid is one of the most hotly debated things. It's like the Beckham drama. Everyone has an opinion. I thought I would find someone who can weigh in on the drama with some authority. So now, I will pass you back to my past self. I journeyed to the Natural History Museum of London to interview Senior Mollusc Curator Jon Ablett. On our way to discussing giant squid, Jon and I spoke at length about a range of other mollusk-related topics, so you, the listener, will hopefully leave this episode with a full-bodied understanding of the giant squid, but also its equally bizarre and mysterious relatives, which include other squids, octopuses, cuttlefish, and the nautilus. How intelligent are these animals? How do they use camouflage? And are they even from Earth? All are questions. Some are better than others. Bye now. Hi everyone, it's me. I'm in South Kensington in central London. I'm at the Natural History Museum. Well, I'm outside it, to be specific. It's night time now. I've been wandering around it for hours. It's so big. I can't find the entrance. And I'm not from London, I'm from Leeds, so whenever I'm here, my brain just goes into confused tourist mode. But I should happen upon the entrance soon. Maybe. Jon's invited me here after hours to avoid the crowds. It's teeming with tourists during the day, with over 5 million tourists visiting each year. This building was built in 1881 after Richard Owen, the biologist who coined the word dinosaur, campaigned for the British Museum's Natural History collection to be given a new home. That led to the construction of this great building, designed as a cathedral to nature. There are about 80 million specimens housed in this museum. Animals, plants, rocks, minerals, fossils, rubbish bins, a feat of engineering, and yet, apparently, no doors. I'll never make it to Jon in time at this rate. There are lots of windows, though, and lots of bushes around here. I suppose there might be a door behind this bush here. No door. Ah well, there's a rock on the ground. Maybe there's a door underneath this rock. Let me pick it up. Oh no, I dropped the rock and accidentally smashed it through this 150-year-old Victorian window. Oh dear, look at that. I accidentally made it bigger. Well, seeing as it's big enough for me to squeeze through now, I might as well make the most of it. Ah, fantastic. Sorry, Richard Owen. You should have done more doors. Good job I brought my trusty torch with me. Let's see where we are. Oh! It's the animatronic T-Rex. Wow, spooky. According to my calculations, we are in the right-hand side of the building, which houses the museum's collection of extinct species. I can tell because the stone carvings in the walls and ceilings are of extinct plants and animals. In the left-hand side of the building, the carvings are of living species. I guess the T-Rex is also a clue. We need to get to the left-hand side. So let's go. Perhaps I can touch on the mythology of the giant squid as we make our way to Jon, who is waiting for me in the mollusc collection. Let's go through this door. Wow, we're in a big hall of fossils now. One story perfectly exemplifies the mixing together of fact and fiction. It's known as the Bell Island giant squid attack. So the story goes, in the year of 1873, 2 fishermen were at work in a small rickety rowboat near Bell Island, in the coast of Conception Bay, in Newfoundland. Newfoundland. Ugh, they were in Canada. One of the fishermen, Mr. Theophilus Picot, saw what he believed at first glance to be floating debris, perhaps a submerged shipwreck, and so was led by his natural curiosity to investigate. As the fishermen approached, they saw that the wreckage was at least partially alive. Theophilus poked at the half-alive creature, an impulse impossible to explain or justify, but likely to be repeated by many who might find themselves in the same position. The creature responded furiously, lashing out great tentacles longer than the boat itself, latching onto the vessel and attempting to pull the men beneath the surface. Its eyes, the size of dinner plates, emerging from below to gaze upon the men as it welcomed them to their watery grave. Theophilus stared right back, but before it was too late, took his axe and swung it at the beast.
No mercy!
Detaching its tentacle, causing it to withdraw. It's hard to say exactly where the truth lies in this recounting of the tale. I, for one, know that if I was floating around and minding my own business, and someone came and defiled my innocent body with an oar, I too would emerge angrily from the waves to call them out on their petty nonsense. But the embellishment of details and the demonization of innocent squid aside, one undeniable thing came out of the encounter: the severed tentacle. The fisherman returned to shore, tentacle in tow, and sold it to Reverend Moses Harvey, who photographed the specimen in his living room. And so, from a legendary brawl with a mythological sea creature, evidence was gathered. Let's try this door. A long corridor. I wonder where this goes. In the 18th and 19th centuries, most notably with the rise of the whaling industry, encounters with giant squid began to increase. Although there were more people encountering them, and more specimens being made readily available to science, these intermittent discoveries only added to the mythology of the giant squid. They appeared in works of literature, such as Herman Melville's Moby Dick, and began to take a foothold, or a tentacle hold, in the public consciousness. Because of the incomplete nature of specimens, and the fact that most people had and would never see a giant squid with their own eyes, people's imaginations ran wild. The giant squid was described and named in a paper in 1857 by Danish zoologist Jupiter Steenstrup. Thus, the giant squid, Architeuthis dux, was inducted officially into the scientific tree of life, and there's one here in this very museum. It's called Archie, the Architeuthis, and hopefully it's behind this door. No, but this seems promising. At least there are some lights on along this corridor, and it seems a little more modern. Just the sort of place where scientists might be doing late-night research. These doors are labelled perfect. Cnidaria, that's your jellyfishes, corals, sea anemones, nope. Annelids, earthworms and leeches, bleh, nope, but we're getting closer. This door doesn't have a label. I've got a good feeling about this door. I bet it's the mollusc room. I'm seeing lots of insects and some researchers. Hello, sorry to interrupt. I'm looking for the mollusc room. I have a meeting with Jon Ablett. Hello, do you know where the mollusc collection is, please? Can you guys hear me? They're just staring at me. Okay, well, never mind. Have a good night. Enjoy your insects. Insect people are weird. Here, perfect. Molluscs. In we go. John, I'm thrilled that you agreed to meet me here after hours at London's Natural History Museum. I was let in the front door and escorted here by security. I definitely didn't break in through a window and explore the museum by myself before getting here. So, thanks for meeting me.
Oh, a pleasure. Yeah, it's really nice to meet you.
You are the curator of molluscs at the Natural History Museum of London. I can't quite believe that, not a fanboy, but I can't quite believe that I'm talking to the Natural History Museum's mollusc curator. Can you believe that you are the mollusc curator of the NHM?
Uh, can I? Not really. I mean, it's such a wonderful job that I have. There's not just me, there's three of us in total, which is probably for the best because between us, we look after about 8 million specimens. So that's about 10% of the museum's entire holdings. So the museum holds around 80 million objects, and your molluscs, we think, make up around 8 million. And yeah, it's a really awesome job. I never thought I would end up in it. Life worked out that way, very fortuitously.
Have you always had an interest in molluscs?
No, that's awful, isn't it? I always feel I should say yes, but I didn't. I was obsessed with natural history as a kid, and I kind of lost my passion temporarily when I was in my kind of teens or whatever. And I went to university and I didn't know what I was going to study, but I hated biology the least out of all my subjects. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go and do. In the end, I ended up doing zoology, and then realized that I'd still had that amazing passion for natural sciences. And then, yeah, just kind of accidentally and incredibly luckily through doing a studentship at the museum as part of my degree, I had no real idea like what natural history museums did. I didn't realize they had this kind of whole behind the scenes science aspect. And as soon as I understood that, I was like, oh my goodness, this is where I want to work. This is what I want to do. It's just amazing.
I suppose that there's no rule that you have to love mollusks from day one to be the mollusk curator in the end. Whatever gets you there. Um,
Exactly. And now
it's
I do
nice.
love molluscs. So, it's all okay.
Do you, or do you feel obliged to say that now?
No, I always joke with people that I'm so glad I work on a group where there's enough for everyone. So I always feel, if you worked on something like birds or sharks, everyone loves birds, sharks, whales, whatever. You're fighting the world and his wife to get your niche to like become an expert. There's so many mollusks that there's not enough of us. It's come one, come all. We need everyone to come and help us study these, to investigate them. So yeah, I feel really fortunate to end up in a group where there's just so much to do.
Oh, fantastic. That's kind of a casting call as well to anyone who might be listening who has a passing interest in mollusks or the capacity to build one. Um,
Exactly.
so, John, you have compared your job as a curator to the job of a librarian. By that, do you mean that you like to wear ugly cardigans or that you enjoy shushing people?
Do you know, I don't think I even own a cardigan. I'm not quite sure I can pull one off. Do I like shushing people? No, I'm a fan of noise and loud. But I guess what I meant when I compare myself to a librarian is that kind of organization of objects. And I kind of often slightly lazily say that if I'm talking to a younger school group and I kind of want to try and people to understand the job of a curator, because I think most people probably have never met a curator. They might not really know what one is. So it's the fact that I look after objects, not books. I look after preserved mollusks, and it's the keeping them in an order. So a librarian keeps books in an order, use the Dewey Decimal System or whatever, in order to be able to locate objects from a large collection. And I kind of do the same. So I have a large collection of preserved mollusks. I don't. The Natural History Museum does, and I look after them. They're not mine, apparently. And in order to locate them, we keep them in a taxonomic order. So basically, an order of relatedness. So all the closely related species are close together, and as you spread out physically through the collection, the objects are less closely related. And just like a librarian, people use the collections. Instead of going into your library and pulling a book off to read to get knowledge, people take a shell out of a drawer or a jar off a shelf and they use them to learn more about the natural world. And I guess just like a library, the users that come in have so many different purposes. Most of the people I interact with are scientists from maybe other museums, or they might come from universities or research institutes, or they might be amateurs, but they're using their collections to learn more about the natural world. Maybe they're trying to describe new species. Maybe they're trying to work out the relationship between species. They might be looking at conservation. We have artists who come in, quite a few I work with regularly. There's architects, engineers, designers, people in kind of medical fields. There are so many different people that want to use our collection to kind of gain inspiration or to just understand certain aspects of molluscan biology or physiology. And it's just like a library. They're extracting information and then returning to the shelves so that other people can do the same.
Having visited the Natural History Museum many times and been amazed by what you can see as a member of the public, I'm trying to imagine how big is the museum's collection?
So the museum holds around 80 million objects. And there probably is an official figure, but surely less than 1% of what the museum houses is on display.
Wow.
I guess if you think about it, most of nature and biodiversity is small. So, huge numbers of those collections are going to be the insect collections. I think there's around 10 million beetles or so, there's similar 8 to 10 million butterflies and moths in the collection. There's an 8 million odd mollusks. And the things that take up most of the kind of real estate in galleries tends to be, much to my upset, your charismatic animals, your mammals, your birds, your reptiles, maybe your fishes if you're lucky,
Yeah.
and dinosaurs, of course. But most of nature is small, and so I think, when people probably see a much larger percentage of these vertebrate collections, whereas the invertebrate collections, and I think that's not just the kind of bias of what people like. It's really hard to display small animals interestingly in a way that the people coming around the museum can understand them without, microscopes or kind of enlarging kind of visual equipment. And we're just much less familiar. So I think there's been an ongoing challenge for people who work in museums to try and bring out invertebrates and the smallness that we see in nature into a gallery.
I'd like to ask you quite a basic question. What is a mollusk? Because I know that a snail, for example, and a giant squid are both mollusks, but it's not very easy to imagine their shared traits.
No, you're right. It's a really interesting question. And to be honest, I often start a talk with what is a mollusk, unless I'm in a specifically mollusk audience. I think it's always worth revisiting because people often don't know. So mollusks are a super broad range of organisms, and they have very different external characters at first glance. Like you said, giant squid, snails, both mollusks look very different. And that's because they've been around for such a long time. They've been around for, well, we think their ancestors go back to about 550 million years. So that's an enormously long time. So that's a long time to evolve a huge range of body plans.
Yeah, wow.
And if we look at today's mollusks, you get them in all terrestrial and aquatic environments. So you get them in the sea, you get them in rivers, you get them on the land, you get them at the top of mountains, you find them in deserts. No flying mollusks evolved as yet, although some do hitchhike on birds, either in their digestive system or are trapped to their feathers or feet, but no mollusks fly yet.
Emphasis on yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you never know. They are wonderful. But when you think about a mollusk, I guess the uniting feature or the thing that most people think of is this shell, this calcium-based shell. And it's thought that this shell evolved in early marine ancestors. All life came from the sea, as we know. The idea being that the very soft-bodied, squidgy kind of proto-mollusk type creature gather calcium from its environment and probably secrete it in some kind of mucus layer to, I guess, kind of form like spines, spikes, we don't really know, plates of calcium to help prevent it from attack from predators around it.
Mm-hmm.
And then through evolution, this evolved into a shell, not as complex as the ones we see, but some kind of covering. And this shell exists in all mollusk groups, although in some it's been reduced. So obviously, if you think of a garden snail, you've got that beautiful, wherever you're in the world, you're going to have garden snails in your garden. You think of that lovely coiled structure. It's very obvious. If you think of sea snails, very beautiful, ornate, often snails in marine environments, you're going to picture this lovely shell. The same as bivalves, so clams, mussels, and oysters. You have this kind of obvious shell. But slugs and squid and octopus also have a shell. It's just that they've been reduced over time through evolution so that they're internal. So slugs actually have a small shell plate, usually just behind the head, sometimes at the end of the tail.
Oh.
So they have this internal shell, and it usually looks like a kind of fingernail. It's just a little plate under the skin.
You can't see it.
You can't see it really. There's a few slug groups you can. As an aside, there's a really cool group called semi-slugs, and this reduction has sort of partly happened. So the shell is reduced. The animal can't kind of retreat fully into it. So the shell kind of sits like a little hat on its back, which is rather cool. But in the case of the cephalopods, again, the shell has been reduced. So it's internal. You think of something like a cuttlefish, you might have seen the internal shell in like a budgie cage or a parrot's cage. They're often used as kind of bird feed as a source of calcium. So that's an internal structure. And the chambered nautilus is the only cephalopod to have an external shell. So they're a very ancient and off to the side group of cephalopods, often beloved of natural history programs because they're so beautiful to watch. But yeah, they have an external shell. But yeah, so you think shell is obvious in mollusks, but actually in some, it's not that obvious.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, so that's like a shared trait because it's the thing that unites them throughout history, but now it presents itself to varying degrees.
Exactly. If you've been around for 550 odd million years, you're going to get a real range of forms and reduction of forms as well.
Is a mollusk an equivalent level of grouping to a vertebrate?
Vertebrates and a few other things, like with a notochord from pulling up from my brain. So yeah, it's a really high level grouping of animals. So yeah, it's the equivalent to basically all vertebrates.
Yeah, so that helps. It kind of helps explain why some look so different. So it's like the same as discussing fish and monkeys in the same breath.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. So of all of the mollusks, the cephalopods I venture to say are the most widely beloved, perhaps, and people tend to find them quite exciting, I guess because they're so different and also they're by far the largest mollusks. So, another rather simple question: what is a cephalopod? Is there a group of traits that they all have?
They do. So, do you know, I'm good. Before I answer that question, I'm just going to say I agree. Most people do prefer cephalopods, but I prefer snails. I'm gonna,
Oh,
which is,
really?
I just love
Explain
it.
why. Yeah.
So, why do I love a snail? I like terrestrial snails. I think that they are, well, it's the group I study, which might be slightly biased, but the hidden biodiversity is what I love about terrestrial mollusks. So, for example, I'm in the UK, we have 100 different species of just terrestrial, ignore freshwater mollusks, just terrestrial mollusks. And I bet your average person does not realize we have this diversity. And we have a super low diversity. You know, most countries have many, many hundred more species. They're kind of ignored. They are not obvious. You have to look for them. But when you do, you see an amazing diversity, amazing range in form, adaptation to environment. They are indicators of ecosystem health. There have been more recorded land snail extinctions in the last 200 years than any other group of animals, mainly on islands and island chains. They don't move, they tend to be very restricted in where they occur. So, you know, if you deforest an area, if you build factories on an area, houses, whatever, if you drain an area, if you change the environment, these are hugely susceptible to dying out, to becoming much more rare. And there's so much we don't know about them. I always think it's really cool to work on an area where there are so many more species to discover. You know, it's a really big deal if someone finds a new bird species, a new mammal species, but people find new mollusk species every week, like huge species discovery. I mean, I love the occasions I get to go on fieldwork, but I could never leave the museum, just go through the drawers of mollusks and find dozens of new undescribed species just from what's already been collected. I don't know, there's just so much untapped potential in land snails. But after saying that, there is something undeniably charismatic about cephalopods. And I agree, I don't know what it is, but there is something, I guess maybe otherworldly about cephalopods. They've got an alien likeness about them. I mean, I think that the ocean is a pretty amazing but possibly terrifying place. That deepness, the darkness, it's you know,
Mm-hmm.
we can't survive there. And cephalopods are odd. If you think about a basic body plan, even the name itself, cephalopod means head feet. So ceph means head, pod means feet. And they've basically got their head next to their feet. Their body plan is you start at one end, you've got, I guess it's a bit like me having my head between my legs and my body. So if you picture a squid
Yeah.
at the kind of bullet shaped end, the non arms and tentacles end, you've got what we call the mantle. And this is the body. So this is where all the organs are, the reproductive system, the digestive system, the respiration system. So basically how it breathes, how it reproduces, how it eats. Then you've got the head in the middle of the animal.
Yeah, right.
And then you've got the arms and the tentacles, depending on what group of cephalopods you are. So they're really odd, interesting body plans. And what I've just described is kind of the general features. So you have a mantle, which is where all the organs are. It's often used in movement. If you think about the way that many cephalopods move, they bring in water into the mantle, they take out the oxygen over their gills, and then they push that water out through a funnel, sometimes called a siphon. So they move a bit like a jet ski or, you know, kind of a speedboat, I guess, kind of moving through the water. Then you've got a head region. Most cephalopods have a large, complex brain, often said to be the most intelligent invertebrate group. And the brain is actually donut shaped because they've got this strange body plan. You've got the mouth at one end, then the head, then you've got the stomach at the back. So the food actually has to go through the middle of the brain. The esophagus runs through the brain to get to the stomach.
Oh my God, wow.
In the head, they have usually, but not always, complex eyes, and they feed with a parrot like beak. So all cephalopods have this mouthpart structures called beaks, which they use to crunch their food. They also have a structure called a radula, which is another thing that links them to other mollusks. So in your gastropods, so your coiled shells, if you picture a snail rasping your lettuces or whatever you have in your garden, then the structure that the snail is using to remove the cabbage leaf or whatever your lettuce is the same structure, this rolling ribbon of, I guess, sandpaper or bandsaw, I guess. Cephalopods have this as well, which they use to break up their food before they swallow it. And then so you've got the mantle, you've got the head, and then at the other end is where you've got the limbs. And depending what kind of cephalopod you are, depends how many limbs you have. So nautiluses have around 90 arms. And there's two things, there's arms and tentacles. So nautiluses have about 90 arms in two circles around the beak.
That must be very handy.
Exactly, exactly. But the octopuses have 8 arms, and then squid and cuttlefish have 8 arms and 2 longer tentacles. And generally, these tentacles tend to be used for catching food, where the arms are manipulating food. And the sort of basic difference when you're looking at them is arms have suckers all the way along them, whereas the tentacles tend to only have suckers at the very end, the end of these clubs. And these different groups kind of live in different ways. Sorry, I realize I'm just kind of gone on a kind of cephalopod rant.
Oh, please do.
So yeah, and octopuses tend to be associated, and there's always exceptions to the rule, of course, but generally octopuses are found on the seabed or near the seabed, and sort of more kind of, you think of moving their arms to move across the substrate, whereas squids tend to be found sort of more pelagic. They're in the open ocean at different levels, different ecological niches. But yeah, so octopuses tend to be bottom, squid tend to be sort of open water animals.
Are they all of these cephalopods carnivorous?
They are. So all cephalopods are predatory. I mean, within that, we also include sort of detritivores eating kind of dead or rotting things. But yeah, they all eat meat. You don't get any vegetarian cephalopods. Whereas there are herbivores in other molluscan groups like snails and things like
snails, maybe.
Exactly. We're back to snails.
I didn't know that they had donut-shaped brains. That's made me feel hungry. But they also, speaking of their brains, they are, I don't know if this is true for all of them, but they, yeah, as you mentioned, they're known for their intelligence. And I wonder what your thoughts are on how intelligent they are. And also if I mean, this is totally a loaded question, but if we're maybe a bit biased in how we even, I mean, how do we even judge the intelligence of an animal that has a completely different life to us, that lives in a different environment?
Yeah,
There's no right answer.
No, I think it's really fascinating, and it's one that I get asked a lot. Things like, My Octopus Teacher, that was, big kind of hit TV show. And there's been some amazing books recently, all of which have left my brain as I'm trying to remember them. But there's been some really, really wonderful books published recently discussing cephalopod intelligence, really nice popular science books that maybe I'll remember in a second. And they are intelligent. But yeah, you're right. How do we discuss intelligence? How do we compare animals that evolve differently and show intelligence in different ways? One interesting bias is everyone talks about octopus intelligence and never talk about squid intelligence. I'm pretty sure one reason for this is related to how they live. So because octopus live on the bottom, you can keep them in a lab. You don't need a massive aquarium. But with squid are open water animals, you would need to keep them in some kind of Olympian pool-sized enclosure. So we already have a bias in what is easy. I mean, if you think about what people study, fruit flies, rats, these are things you can keep in a lab easily. I imagine, you can't keep a herd of rhinos easily in a lab. I'm not saying rhinos are massively intelligent. I have no idea. But I'm just saying that
presents challenges.
There's already a bias in what is practical. What can I easily keep in a study lab? There are also, ethical rules and regulations about what you can study. For example, because cephalopods are deemed to be so intelligent, you need licenses to work with them, to keep them in labs as well. So people understand they are intelligent. What groups are intelligent, we don't really know. Like I said, it's mainly the octopus that have been studied. And they definitely show intelligence. So they can solve similar puzzles to as we find in things like rats and pigeons, which are very intelligent. You know, the kind of food reward experiments that were very popular in the sort of 1950s, 1960s, pressing levers in order to get food, solving mazes. They've been shown to have memory. So once they've found their way through a maze, they can remember it and do it again. If you change the maze, they don't realize that and get confused when, you know, they try and go the same way and it's blocked because they have a memory. They show tool use, which is one way that we think animals show intelligence. So, you know, traditionally you think of things like apes, monkeys using tools in order to, you know, crack open things. Certain octopuses hold things like discarded coconut shells or rocks to kind of shield them from predators. They've been set tasks like opening jars or containers in order to get food. They can kind of observe an object and try and work out how to solve it. So yeah, certain cephalopods seem to be very intelligent, and it's probably because they're all predators. Because they're a predatory group, you need to have a level of intelligence to catch prey. You know, they're not just, many of them are not just waiting for things to pass by and grab them, although I'm sure some species do. But yeah, they're active hunters. And I think that probably active hunting is a good evolutionary driver for intelligence. If you're going to pack hunt, you need some kind of communication. Communication means intelligence. If you're trying to plan something, you know, you're thinking about the future. This is not just I'm reacting to my environment. This is I want to eat this, so therefore I'm going to do this. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that predatory nature has driven this.
Yeah, they've got to come up with little tricks and plans, haven't they?
I mean, I remember seeing on probably pretty sure it was a David Attenborough thing a few years ago, where there was an octopus and I think it was a grouper that were working together in a coral reef to sort of trap an item of prey. So they were kind of like blocking off different edges, working together. And, you know, that kind of interspecies cooperation shows a level of intelligence that I think is amazing. And yeah, there's all these lovely little stories that you see, you know, there's a thing called the Humboldt squid, Dosidiscus gigas, which is a pack hunter. They're very, very aggressive. And yeah, they work together as a team, I guess like a pack of wolves, in order to kind of corral and shoal their food and to increase their hunting success. So yeah, there's loads of lovely stories. But again, because the ocean is a very unique and difficult environment, it's hard to observe these animals in the wild. And I guess there's lots more exciting behaviors that we haven't even thought of yet, haven't even discovered.
Their ability to work together to hunt prey is amazing. You're right. It's also terrifying.
Yeah, we await our cephalopod overlords with great respect.
Yeah. We're speaking fondly of them today, just in case. I've heard about Humboldt squid attacking people. Have you heard about that?
I have not a first-hand account, but I believe they sort of live in Gulf of Mexico way, central US, although I believe that their distribution is changing with global climate change. But yeah, I've read that there are stories of local fishermen, especially being attacked by them, and I believe killed. Although, yeah, I don't know for certain, but they certainly are incredibly aggressive. And I have met someone once that was attacked by one.
Really?
Yeah. So
They
yeah,
live to tell the tale.
they lived to tell the tale. They were aware they were working for a film crew, trying to get some, and there was but they were aware of the dangers, treated them the respect and the safety. But they unpredictable and aggressive predators. I imagine when you're working in that kind of field, you do your homework.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's nice then. I suppose if you were to go walk into a pride of lions, then I suppose that would also come with risks. And it's hard to imagine them as being these like amazing, intelligent predators because they look so different and it's like funny, but they are. It's cool.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean the fact that they recognize humans. There was a really lovely anecdote I read once where there was I think it was a cuttlefish in a tank in the UK somewhere in a study group, and this cuttlefish would only squirt ink at one particular, I think it was a postdoc who, you know, just took a dislike to. And you think about that, that's kind of recognizing another species' individual face. Like, I mean, I don't know if I could tell 10 cuttlefish apart consistently if I walked into a room, but this one individual cuttlefish, for some reason, didn't like this particular person working in the lab and would squirt this individual with water and ink when it came in, but not other people.
I don't know if I could tell the difference between 10 humans, to be honest. I love how petty they are. That's fantastic. You mentioned that they need to communicate with each other a lot. I'm sure that varies depending on the species, but they also use color a lot. They're
Yeah.
well known for that. I wonder if that has anything to do with communicating between themselves, or they also do it for camouflage. Yeah, how do they use color?
So, yeah, the color change is absolutely fascinating. So, they change color and also texture, which helps with the camouflage. So, not all, but most cephalopods are covered with a structure called chromatophores. And chromatophores basically are a group of cells that, well, the majority of them change color. So they kind of have a pigment filled inner sac. And by stretching the walls of this sac within the cell under nervous control, they change color. I guess it's like drawing a colored dot on a clear balloon. And when the clear balloon is deflated, you don't really see the dot. But when you inflate the balloon, this colored dot grows and fills the space. And many cephalopods have different colored chromatophores. So you inflate all your red cells, you turn red. You inflate all your yellow cells, you turn yellow. And just like our lovely color wheel and paint mixing, by having primary colors, by having iridescent type cells, there's other cells called iridiophores and leucophores, which act like give it kind of that shimmer, the light. They kind of reflect other light as well. They can basically change to any color to match their surroundings. So yeah, one reason they use this color change is for camouflage. And I'm sure most people have seen octopuses, especially maybe cuttlefish as well, sort of matching their surroundings, blending in. And not just these chromatophores, but they have these structures called papillae in the octopus, which cover the surface of the skin. And they basically are like little hairs of tissue. And they can either be very flat, so the animal looks smooth, or they can push them into these papillae, these points, to make them bumpy. So by changing the color and the texture of the skin, they can kind of perfectly blend into their right. They can mimic the kind of rocky texture or coral texture, or make themselves smooth like seagrass. And of course, camouflage is always useful because if things can't see you, they can't eat you. It allows you to lie in wait for prey. So it helps with hunting as well as getting away from being eaten. They also use color and color change in mating displays. I think my favorite example of that is in the giant Australian cuttlefish. So these live in harems, just like, we think of some mammals might living in them. So you get large dominant males who fight other males, and they have then mating rights over the females that live within this group. But what do you do if you're a small male Australian cuttlefish? Well, what they do is they take on female coloration and they live as females within the group. And when the big male is off around the other side of its territory, they change back into their male coloration and they mate with the females. And this is known as sneaky mating, which I think is amazing. And it's not been well studied in the wild because it's hard to know how successful is it. But in aquarium settings where you can look at the genetic makeup of the next population of the offspring, it's thought to be around 30% of the next generation are fathered by these sneaky males rather than by the dominant male. So it's a good strategy. So they're using color for mimicry, not of the environment, but of the other sex of their species. But they also use this kind of color for, showing aggression, maybe if two males are fighting, or if lots of cephalopods are solitary, especially octopuses. They don't like living in groups, so they show color for warning. Some, just like I guess your snakes, your bees, and your wasps, use color to show how dangerous they are. So all octopus are venomous, but some are more. All octopus studied so far are venomous. Most of them not particularly dangerous though. But things like, as I'm sure you well know, in Australia, blue-ringed octopus, the bright yellow octopus with iridescent blue circles on it. This is using color as a warning to show I am incredibly toxic. I have an incredibly potent venom. And for example, if a human is bitten, they can die. It shuts down the heart muscles. So yeah, there's color being used for communication, but also lights as well. Lots of cephalopods have photophores, so light emitting organs. Because if you think about it, color is great if there is light. So in the upper layers of the ocean, in the deep ocean, there's no point particularly being
Not so
colorful.
helpful.
He's going to see, and not so helpful, exactly. So yeah, many animals in the deep ocean use light, and cephalopods are no exception. I guess my favorite is probably the jeweled squid, sometimes called a strawberry squid, the Histiochuthids. And these are called jewel squids because they are covered in so many photophores that we presume that they use for possibly for attracting prey. So again, using color or light to attract things, but also for probably communication, maybe for mating, maybe for keeping social groups together. We don't know. And they're really odd. They generally have one big telescopic eye and one sort of normal squid eye. And that's because they're living in the deep ocean, but they're living kind of on the boundary of the deep ocean and the upper ocean. So one eye, this tubular eye, they kind of lie on their side. This faces up, and it's really evolved for noticing the outline of things above it. So, you're still going to get some light, and you might be able to see the outline of prey or predators above you. Whereas this other eye has a different colored lens, a blue lens, and it's really good at noticing bioluminescent light produced by other animals below it. So yeah, it's using color and observing color in different ways, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, you can't sleep on the wrong side if you're a
No,
strawberry squid.
Exactly.
That's another example of a really completely alien body plan and lifestyle. And I use that word very intentionally because I'd like you to speak on an internet rumor, which I'm sure you've heard. And I don't know if you have a very strong feeling either way, but there is some talk that octopuses are in fact from another planet.
Yeah. So this this kind of came up maybe about 10 years ago, I guess. There was a paper published about cephalopod DNA and octopus DNA. And I think basically there was a throwaway line somewhere, and I don't know who said it. I don't know if one of the authors of the paper or a journalist or something basically said the way they can edit their DNA, it's like they're from another planet. Maybe using alien in the word as in it's very alien, it's very different to other groups, which of course the internet being what it is seized on it and said, of course, they're from outer space. I don't think it's helped either that they look so otherworldly. If you think about lots of science fiction, the rubbery 1970s Doctor Who, Arrival. I don't know if you've seen the film Arrival. I guess when was it out? Like 15 years, maybe more. It's about these aliens coming to Earth and trying to communicate. It's a really good movie. As soon as they came on screen, I was like, oh my goodness, these are cephalopods. They look like squid, deep sea squid species to me. And I've watched like documentaries where different experts on what life could look like on other planets. And often they come back to this kind of squid body plan of thinking, oh, well, if life existed on another environment, maybe it would look like this. And there's often a certain squidiness to these imaginary or imagined alien forms. So yes, but no, molluscs are not aliens, and cephalopods are not aliens. They evolved on this planet 100%. They just have been around a long time. And I am not a geneticist, so it absolutely blows my brain. But the way that they edit their DNA, or can, has given them these little bumps in evolution that have caused these great body changes and made them so adaptable and made them so successful, is unusual and different from many groups, but very sadly not alien life forms.
Well, it sounds like you're on the fence, so I'm gonna run with the alien theory. That's a relief. Now, I would like to ask you, John, do you have a favorite specimen? If it isn't Archie, the giant squid, please can you pretend that it is so that my follow-up questions make sense?
Of course, it's not Archie, but I will pretend it is Archie.
Okay, what is it? What is it then?
So I'm going to tell you what my favorites are doing, but feel free not to use this, but Archie's a top favorite. So I think my favorites. So one of the things I love about the collection is we have amazing species from all over the world, but I really like the stories that go with them. So sometimes specimens were collected by someone very important, very famous, maybe an explorer, maybe someone you didn't realize had a mollusk collection. the author of The Joy of the Sex collected molluscs. He was a molluscan scientist as well. Alex Comfort, his name was. So, people, all kinds of people have turned their hands at molluscan science.
Darwin, he's got one
Darwin.
at your museum.
Yeah, we do. We have an octopus collected by Darwin. I also have a snail from the Galapagos collected by Darwin. But I think my favorite is from the 1850s, and it's a desert snail, Eremina desertorum. And at the time, the Natural History Museum wasn't in South Kensington. It was part of the British Museum. So the Natural History Museum separated from the British Museum in 1881, basically just too much stuff and they needed their own home. But at that time, someone sent back a snail from Egypt. And this was the fashion at the time. They would basically display them on the walls. They'd glue them to boards and show them on the walls just to show the diversity of life. And so it was sent back in about 1849 maybe. And then 4 years later, whoever was doing my job at the museum noticed that the animal was still alive. What had happened is it had gone into hibernation. So it was glued onto the wall in the British Museum, stuck to a board. But you might have seen, I'm sure it happens in Australia, but in the UK, when it gets very cold, lots of snails go into this kind of torpor state, either aestivation in the summertime when it's too hot for them, or hibernation in the winter when it's too cold for them. And they secrete this, what we call an epiphragm. There's basically a mucus plug on the aperture of the shell. It clogs it up and it kind of shuts down its body system and waits out until it's okay. The environment is nice for it. And this desert snail had done the same. It had gone into aestivation in the hot desert sun. It had come back. It was still very dry. Snails like it to be moist, and it stayed glued on a wall. And then someone removed it from the wall, plopped into a little glass of water, wetted it a little bit, and it crawled and lived for a little bit longer. But now it's in the collection again. So it did die again a year or so later, and now it's back in the collection. I love that little story. So that might be one of my favorites, but I couldn't say that, hand on heart, that I don't have a really special place for Archie, our giant squid, in the museum. I feel our careers are strangely linked. So I started work at the museum in 2003, and then I hadn't been there very long when in 2004 got a message from some colleagues in the Falkland Islands, from the Fisheries Institute there, who said, hey, we've got a really massive squid. Would you like it for your collection? And sent some pictures. And I was like, yes, that is a massive squid. Yeah. And it was, of course, a giant squid. And giant squid are pretty rare in museum collections. When they do occur, they're normally partial bits. So usually giant squid are found either washed up on beaches, sort of partially decaying or incomplete, or at least in our collection there, we have them mainly from the stomachs of sperm whales. So in the past, well, of course, many countries had whaling industries. And even when they didn't, they would put scientists on other countries' whaling boats, because predatory whales, things like sperm whales, are much better at sampling the cephalopods of the deep ocean than we are. So they would go through the stomach contents of whales, pull out the bits, and they'd end up in the museum. Incidentally, the first record of the colossal squid, which I'm guessing we might talk about in a bit, was found from the stomach of a sperm whale, which is pretty amazing. But when we got this call from the Falkland Islands that fishing boat had caught a complete, intact and pretty large, if not fully grown squid, we were super excited. But I mean, I'd only been in my job a year max. And to suddenly say, hey, we've got this really huge, rare, important thing. Do you want to preserve it? I mean, it's a little bit daunting. It's still the largest, what we call wet specimen, so alcohol preserved specimen that we've ever preserved in the museum. And so I basically wrote to all the people who do my job around the world and say, hey, I've just got a massive giant squid. What would you do? And actually, we didn't really do anything different to what we'd do if we got, I don't know, a snail or a squid from the UK coastline. We did our time-honoured curatorial processes and preservation processes. So we have a very beautiful 8.62 metre giant squid on display in the basement of the Natural History Museum, who is lovingly called Archie, because it's short for Architeuthis dux, which is the scientific name for the giant squid. And yeah, she is amazing because I've got to speak to so many different people. Obviously, it was a little bit of a media sensation when it came out. It's a good way to be thrown in at the deep end of your media training and do some cool things. But I've got to meet different people who want to come and visit her. Every year, some film crew, some journalists wants to learn a little bit more about them. And I think the giant squid are interesting, but it's a really good way to hang other things. Kids love big things, right? I mean, everyone loves big things. You like your dinosaurs, you like your blue whales, you like your big predators. And museums and science can use specimens like these to hang on other stories. So if we want to talk about evolution, adaptation to environment, life in different environments, having specimens like Archie as a kind of a hook to get people interested. And she's really cool anyway, so, despite that. So yeah, she is definitely a favorite museum specimen.
You were definitely thrown in the deep end. Am I right in thinking that you got in touch with Damien Hirst's team to figure out how they constructed such massive tanks?
Yeah. I really wanted, well, one of the agreements with the Falklands Fisheries Office was we would put it on display, but it was so heavy, we couldn't go in the main museum. It just would have gone through our lovely grade one listed flooring. So there's only certain rooms it could be in, and contacted a few different tank manufacturers. And because it's not preserved in alcohol, it's preserved in a slightly different chemical, formal saline, just has different sort of safety implications. We've really struggled to find someone. So in the end, yeah, we got in touch with Damien Hirst's team Science. I'm just like, who makes your massive tanks? Yeah, our tank is made of the same materials as his lovely sharks and his cows cut in half as well. So it's my own little kind of modern art masterpiece, I like to think.
It's stunning. I've seen, well, in photos, I'm sure it's quite something in real life where art meets science. I suppose that's actually a reoccurring theme of the giant squid in a sense, because for a long time, I suppose the giant squid was purely fiction appearing in art. And then we found out that it's actually a real thing that lives on our planet. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like humans love the unknown, and like lots of our legends and myths and stories come out from trying to interpret a world we don't fully understand. And I think it's really interesting that most different civilizations and countries have this kind of squiddy beast thing. You've got like the Kraken in like Northern Europe, you've got the Skyla in Greek mythology, you've got the Lusca in Caribbean mythology. And there's lots of depictions of kind of large squiddy octopusy type things in kind of Chinese and Japanese mythology. And again, it goes back to this, I don't know, mistrust of the sea. I guess, the sea traditionally would have been a very dangerous and unusual place, and odd things would occasionally wash up. And there's a really sort of interesting studies about things like these Kraken mythologies. In Northern Europe is one area where historically there's been lots of washing up of giant squid. And, if a giant squid washes up, what are you going to make of it? It's going to be a sea beast, right? It's going to be something from the deep. It might, or is it a tentacle? Is it one of the heads of a many-headed sea beast? Is it? And by the time they've kind of half decomposed, maybe stretched in the sun, you can definitely understand how these animals were interpreted as creatures from the deep, dragging sailors down to their depths, crushing ships. And we don't think giant squid get big enough to do that. So our best guesstimate at the moment is that giant squid reach maybe 12 meters in length for the females, maybe 10 for the males. So not pulling down tall ships big, but certainly an impressive size nonetheless. The only thing is we also don't think that we would ever really come into contact with them until they were kind of dead or dying. So in the 1980s, there was a study done on some giant squid blood. It was thought that they use hemocyanin, so they use copper rather than iron to extract oxygen from the water. And just the way that their blood chemistry works, it's unlikely they can survive above kind of 150 meters from the surface. So when we see giant squid at the surface, they're usually dead or dying or incredibly, sort of on the way out. So, yeah, plucking sailors off the deck of ships, very unlikely. Although I have seen I've seen photos, haven't seen the real object, of some marks on the front of a US Navy submarine type thing, the hull of that looks a bit like squid marks. So I'm sure that at a certain depth, as we said, intelligent, I'm sure they have a little kind of investigation of human-made objects. But no, sadly, probably not dragging sailors to their doom. Although I say it happens in myth and mythology, but a few years ago, but I'm guessing probably nearly 15, 20, there's a really great book by an author called China Miéville called Kraken. And that is this whole kind of modern apocalyptic story about these cults that try and start the end of the world by sacrificing Archie at the Natural History Museum. So, not just ancient legends, but these modern art, literature, crossover things. And I love that book. I can't, it stars a character, I think his name's Billy. And I read it thinking it was me because, there's
Well,
only one.
yeah,
I am the curator of cephalopods there, right? It's a very odd experience reading a book that is not about you. But
you
I
are
did.
Billy.
I
That's
am Billy.
You've just reminded me. I'm pretty sure my mum recommended that her book club read Kraken, and I think that while the rest of her book club may have been a little confused, I think she loved it. So you're in the same boat there.
Yeah, it's a really, I really like him as an author. I read a few of his books. It's a kind of, modern, yeah, because it's set sort of now, contemporary, but like, yeah, it's got this lovely kind of feeling of like myth and mythology. Yeah, I really liked it.
And Archie's a character in it.
Archie is a character, exactly. Who could want more?
So I suppose it depends on your, like, how strict you're being, whether or something falls into science or fiction, because based on everything that you just said, it's like these are huge. See, perhaps monsters is a very loaded term, but to me, it's an exciting one, and it doesn't come with prejudice. But it is really thrilling to think that things like that exist. Yeah,
Definitely. And that's one thing that, I mean, I'm not saying we're going to find monsters, and like you say, it's a loaded term, but like this exploration of the unknown is one thing that all scientists love, right? That's kind of what we want to do. There's things we don't know, and we want to know them. And that could be exploring the deep ocean to look for new species. It could be trying to understand how these things that we've only found in the stomachs of sperm whales live. How do they actually exist in their environment? Yeah, I think you're right. There's this kind of desire to explore the unknown, which is a very human trait, is kind of at the forefront of all science. And we might not be quite, the adventurers of old, but maybe we can do a little bit of that from the desks in South Kensington.
yeah, with or millions and millions of specimens, I suppose there's the opportunity. I wonder in that case, with something like the giant squid, where they are so elusive and you do mainly see specimens found in the gut contents of sperm whales, how would you begin to study what the animal does in the wild and how it behaves and what it eats?
So, I mean, most species of mollusks have never been seen, at least for land snails, have never been seen alive. So we might know them from the shell, but we've never seen them in the wild. And the same with cephalopods. There's lots of things that we only know from a few specimens, only from preserved animals. So what you would do is you look at the body plan and you try and imagine how it adapts to environment. Do they have very large eyes? Do they have small eyes? And then you might think, well, if it has very small eyes, maybe it lives super deep down. Or if it has very large eyes, it might live super deep down because you need a larger eye to try and capture any glimmer of light. You might look at the body plan. So some squid are very globular, globose, and these are probably not active predators. Maybe they're kind of ambush hunters, whereas your very sleek, bullet-shaped giant squid, you might guess is an active hunter. And then you have these hypotheses, and then hopefully you get to test them. So I mean, when I started talking about giant squid, there was so much we didn't know. They hadn't been seen in the wild. They'd been seen sort of dead and dying, but it wasn't until I guess it was around 2005, 2006 when they were first captured. That was by a team of Japanese scientists. By Professor Kubedera was the kind of lead on that. I mean, people have been trying to see giant squid in the wild for ages, sort of, strapping cameras to the heads of sperm whales to try and catch them
Really?
feeding. I don't think it went very well. I don't think sperm whales liked having them, sort of destroyed their cameras. But this Japanese team basically just put some motion activated cameras in areas where they thought that giant squid were mating. And they got these first pictures of them. Then they found that there was only one. So you kind of think maybe there's solitary individuals. It aggressively took this bait that had been put out. So what we had guessed that they were solitary predatory hunters. You have some evidence before. And then since then, they've been filmed a few more times. And again, on their own, again, seem to be active predators. So it's having a hypothesis, then it's trying to find ways to test this in the wild. Sometimes you get it right, sometimes you get it wrong, but that's always the wonderful thing about a hypothesis. As you get more data, you change it. And yeah, and that's kind of how science works. But I think it's fascinating. When I go through the collections, helping other scientists, or when I'm kind of upkeep of the collection, making sure it's safe for the next generation, you see these strange body plans, and yeah, you just think, what does this eat? What eats it? How does it exist in the environment? And yeah, it is a little bit of a guessing game until you can prove it.
So cool. I'm imagining like your mind must wander as you walk through the collection, looking, you see something you've never seen before, perhaps. You're like, what is that?
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes think I look, 80 million objects. Sometimes I open a drawer and I wonder if I'll ever open it again in my career. I mean, probably, but maybe not. Maybe, I'll never see that particular squid, that particular snail again. And it'll be the next me who next opens the drawer. So, as well as kind of these amazing discovery, there's kind of I was going to say pressure, but it's a nice, respectful pressure of like keeping this amazing collection for intact and usable for the next generation because it's unique. I always say every specimen is a unique example of one species from one time and one place. So it can never be repeated. It never have the same lifestyle pressures. No other animal can repeat that. So every object is potentially interesting for study, and you need that kind of range. If we're looking at change over time, if we're looking at change over space, you need to have repetition of one thing. So whilst we have 8 million objects and 8 million mollusks, we have many replications of the same thing in order to do the different types of science we want to.
But I'm guessing there's only one giant squid.
Actually, we've got one complete giant squid. We've got one nearly complete giant squid, which actually washed up in Scarborough in
Oh,
1930.
lovely.
Scarborough in the north of the UK. So, because we don't think giant squid are rare, we think there's probably many of them in the deep ocean. It's just that they live at depths that we don't come into contact with, and they can get out of the way of our methods of capturing them. Then we've got about another maybe 30 bits of giant squid. So yeah, stomach contents, things that have washed up, the odd
A
beak
lot.
from yeah. So yeah, we've got a few, but yeah, there's only one Archie.
Only one Archie, yeah. And any colossal squid? You were right before when you guessed that I was going to bring them up.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of colossal squid are really interesting. So they're not closely related to giant squid. They're just another group of the cephalopods that have got really, really big. Giant squid are found in all the world's oceans. You don't tend to get them around the equator, and you don't get them around the polar regions. So you get them in sort of subtropical and temperate waters. Colossal squid are only found around Antarctica, sort of Southern Ocean, and lots of things in polar regions get big. There seems to be this kind of polar gigantism where it somehow benefits you to probably grow very slowly, get very big. I mean, getting big is great because it means nothing can eat you, right?
Yeah.
If you're a certain size, there's only some things that can eat you. So it's a good form of defense. We actually have the types. So the original specimens used for describing the colossal squid, it was described by a man called Guy Coburn Robson. It's a bit of a cephalopod hero of mine. And he found these two partly digested bits of a squid in a sperm whale stomach contents. And he just knew they were so different that he created a whole species out of them. A new species, Mesonocotuthis hamiltoni. So we have the types. We have again, actually probably more colossal squid bits than we do giant squid bits from sperm whale stomach contents. We also have half a baby colossal squid, which was collected by some scientists from the British Antarctic Survey in around 2007, I guess. And they were doing a study on Patagonian toothfish, which is quite a desirable Southern Ocean fish species, quite a high price, high value. And British Antarctic Survey often have people monitoring fishing vessels, looking at stock takes. They're trying to manage the oceans down there. And when they pulled up a long line, which is how they catch these things, there was a colossal squid, a baby one, or a young adult, eating the Patagonian toothfish on the end of the hook. Now, sadly, there's kind of a weak point in squid and sort of where the mantle and the head join. And sadly, they didn't realize there was going to be a colossal squid. And as they pulled the fishing line up, the back end, the mantle went into the ocean. But we have the head and the tentacles, and that's probably 1.5 meters. So, it would have been lovely to have the whole specimen. But yeah, another record of a very mysterious and poorly known animal. It's always a good thing.
How does the colossal squid, based on these incomplete adults or juveniles that you have in your collection, do we have an idea of how big they could get? Are they more colossal than the giant squid?
So that's a really good question. That's a kind of squid scientists in the pub question. So, if you'd have asked me that 20 years ago, I'd have said probably the stock answer was colossal squid probably get to about 18 meters and they get to like over 500 kilograms. And that's kind of the perceived wisdom at the time. We now know that they definitely are heavier. So maybe giant squid get to about 250 plus kilograms. Colossal squid are definitely bigger in weight. They're probably bigger in mass. So giant squid are kind of streamlined and they are like 2/3 tentacle and arms, a third body, that kind of ratio. Colossal squid are like 2/3 body. They're very blobby. They're not sleek. And they're like third kind of arms and tentacles. So they're quite little stubby little arms things.
Yeah.
And actually the jury's out how big they get. So I think lots of the original estimates of how big they get now, people are thinking maybe they don't get as big. So I mean, the real answer is no one knows, but there's maybe a thought that they don't get quite as long as giant squid. I've heard estimates of maybe 8, 9, 10. I've also heard the 18-meter figure repeated. So the answer is we don't know, but the move is definitely, I guess, that maybe they don't get quite as long as we had. I guess hoped is the wrong word, but we'd hope they were massive. They probably possibly don't get that big. Yeah, but we don't really know. And until we find more individuals, fully grown individuals, we're just not going to have a good idea.
It can be left to the imagination until then.
Definitely.
Which one do you think would win in a fight?
I'm going to go giant squid. It's a lovely thing to think about because they will never meet.
Yeah.
Because the colossal squid live in cold waters. It's like polar bears and penguins don't eat each other because they don't live in the same place.
Polar bear and a gorilla?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I would guess, though, if you could get them to meet and they could survive in the same environment somehow, going to go giant squid because I think if you look at a colossal squid, it's so blobby. I think it's probably only suited for ambush predation. It's probably going to lie in the darkness
Ooh,
and sort of grab things out. Whereas I think your giant squid might be a bit more kind of fighty and aggressive. Although the hooks on a colossal squid are horrific. They have these modified suckers that form these kind of almost talon-like chitinous rings in them, and they are terrifying. So I think my money would be on the giant squid, but I think it would be a horrifically long, drawn-out battle.
And do they spin around, the little hooks?
They do. They kind of spin sort of 720 degrees. But sadly, when you preserve them, that's one of the things that stops. There's lots of things about the preservation process is good, but sometimes it kind of stiffens some of the tissues, so you can't do it without preserving.
Do giant squid have the rotating hooks?
No, they just have suckers. They're in a different group. So yeah, they're not closely related groups. So the colossal squid in a group called the crankid squids. And the strange thing is most of the other species in that group are quite small, not very big at all. So it's just this one polar species that has evolved to be massive, whereas the other ones.
Okay, because the colossal squid has the rotating hooks, I'm gonna place a bet on the colossal squid to
It'd be
even
fun to
things
watch
out.
whatever happens.
So what could eat a squid of that size? I guess, is it just a sperm whale? And
Yeah, I mean,
also, I'm really curious to know, could they put up a fight?
so there's two good questions. So both of these things don't start off massive. So, the young be a couple of inches long when they hatch, we assume. So lots of things probably baby giant and colossal squid. We don't really know where the eggs are laid and hatched in the egg masses, but possibly near the surface. So, it's very likely that maybe seabirds and anything and everything will have a go at a baby squid.
Yeah.
As they grow, you're right. It's going to be sperm whales are about the only biggest thing. I think people have found bits of giant squid in sleeper shark stomachs. Maybe I mean Greenland sharks, deep sea sharks anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure that these are known to be kind of scavengers. So, they're probably chewing off bits of dead squid they found decomposing. But yeah, when you're getting to your, however big, let's say 8 meters plus, it's going to be sperm whales that are going to be feeding on you and not a lot else. And I we've all seen those kind of boys' own adventure books where you see a giant squid locked in battle with a sperm whale. I don't think that's the case. I'm pretty sure that the squid is fighting to not be dinner. I don't think it's attacking the sperm whale. I think it's just trying not to be eaten. People have definitely found scarring on sperm whales that matches cephalopod hooks and suckers. But I imagine the way I always think of it is the last ditch attempt not to be dinner rather than an epic battle between two titans.
Yeah, yeah. It does seem like there's probably only one way that that's gonna go.
Yeah, sadly, yes.
Again, until proven otherwise.
Exactly, you never know.
I suppose we've probably already touched on this, but the last question I wrote down is what is it about the giant squid that you think captures people's imaginations and has done throughout history?
Yeah, I think it's the love of the unknown and the big things. Dinosaurs, they lived in a different time, a different environment. They have a very strange body plan. We can relate them to kind of the monsters of our youth, and they were real, which makes it even cooler. And the same thing with giant squid. They live in a strange habitat, one that although we could in theory go there, we're not going to go there. In a different world, they are true monsters of the deep. And yeah, it's just that kind of childlike obsession that often goes into adulthood of the unknown, of mysteries, of myths and legends and monsters. And just like dinosaurs, the fact that they are real is what makes it even more exciting. The fact that we don't know that much about them, that we can learn more about them, that we do learn more about them, I think that's really exciting. There's so much of this planet's biodiversity that we don't understand. So many things in museum collections that we've never seen alive, that we don't know how they interact with their environment and other animals. Yeah, children and adults alike can really get something out of that. And I think we really need these kind of iconic species, these iconic specimens to talk to maybe the less people that are kind of interested in science and nature. If we can get people more interested in conservation, in the biodiversity crisis, and if we can do that through science, through specimens, through podcasts, through things like that, I think iconic things like the giant squid are a really good hook for doing that. And then when people have find out about that, then they can go and find snails and fall in love with them.
Exactly. That is the hidden agenda here, I think.
The entirely not very hidden agenda.
Well, brilliant. So, John, I don't want to be rude, but I just remembered that I have an Actimel in the fridge and it's going to expire if I don't have it within the next few hours. So I'm gonna go.
Okay. Well, it's been very lovely to speak to you, and you got to get to your Actimel.
Bye.
Bye.
Ah, here we are, back in the comforting soapy warmth of the kitchen sink, nestled lovingly between a whisk and a colander. How's it going? Any thoughts, the listener, on the giant squid? Do you believe in them? I don't. I think John was lying. He was definitely lying about octopuses not being from outer space. Of course they are. But I really liked him all the same. He was very interesting to listen to. Thanks so much for speaking with me, John. Thanks to you, the listener, for listening and for your support. I hope you have a wonderful week. And thanks to Damon Macmillan for the music. Now for a poem. This one's called The Legend of the Giant Squid. If I could swim to see what lives 1,000 meters down, where the crushing water from above weighs like a heavy crown, I'd try to poke a glimpse of a creature quite elusive. Underwater torch in hand, for that would be conducive to peering through the murk in a rather desperate bid at witnessing a legendary beast, the giant squid. If I could travel to those depths and if I could swim around, I'd listen out for something, though I'm not quite sure what sound. The sound of one of those huge molluscs, perhaps a gargle or a groan, echoing through the endless and otherwise silent midnight zone. and I would swim towards the gargle, hoping desperately to see those dinner plate-sized googly eyes staring straight back at me. If I could see those eyes, then I'd want to see the body. I wouldn't settle for some obscured view that's frankly shoddy. The head, of course, the mantle too, and I'd want to see the fins. I'd want to see how such a creature successfully swims. A flicker here, a flash of light, the water growing fuller. I'd remember that the giant squid can change its very colour. Slowly the squid would emerge, slowly first, then with a jerk, the camouflage body 40 feet long appearing through the murk. If I could see a squid that close, it might sound some alarms, the writhing and contorting of 8 sentient arms. I'd notice how each arm is pulsating with great suckers, and how just one of them would feel as on my face it puckers. I'd wish that on my clothes I'd sewn in some defensive pentacles, as with my trusty torch I'd highlight both extensive tentacles, each of them beset with clubs which can swiftly beat and bruise, starting up a fight which I would without question lose. And if these limbs were to withdraw, they'd then give me a peek. The most terrible thing I ever saw, a great big scythe-like beak. As ink would start to fill my eyes and the water start to blacken, I'd know that then I'd finally met the devilish fabled Kraken. If I could swim to see what lives 1,000 meters down, I wouldn't. I'd stay up at the surface and float around,